The main character Jae-yun died twice. First in the game, at the hands of those he thought were family. Then waking up to the reality, under the wheels of a garbage truck. But death was not the end. She gave me a chance to start over. The guy went back 5 years. And his new goal was revenge. He'll be resurrecting skeletons, crush monsters, and look for your abusers. The beginning of the events of the manga unfolded in the world of the game. In the dense wildberry forest, full of light and deceptive tranquility, a scarred man emerged from behind the foliage, breathing heavily, his face contorted with pain and exhaustion. The situation was desperate. A ring of enemies had closed around him, and the bodies of the fallen at their feet were a reminder of the recent brutal fight. The leader of the hostile group looked around nervously, as if someone important had not yet arrived, and turned to his partner in suspense. The latter, without hesitation, declared with cold determination that the wounded man must be eliminated without delay. One of the fighters, with a body as if carved out of stone, rushed forward, lashing out with fury and unrelenting force. In that instant, the man, unable to resist, clenched his teeth, preparing to meet his seemingly final blow. But just at that instant, a young boy appeared like lightning, cutting through the air with unnatural speed. With incredible agility, he deflected the blow, protecting the wounded man and instantly disarming the axe-wielding assailant. His throw was accurate and powerful. The enemy flew aside like a rag doll, and the technique was amazing in its purity. The man's companions were immediately relieved and, barely believing they had been saved, called out the savior's name, Jihyun. Meanwhile, the enemy fighters shouted, recognizing him as Kana, and conjured each other to attack in full force. But this guy moved with astonishing ease, cutting off punches as if predicting every move. Swing after swing, his sword struck his enemies. And one by one they fell, unable to continue the fight. Jae-hyun stood straight, with a slight, almost mocking smile, as if he knew ahead of time that no one would be able to resist him. He stated that even if the entire army came down on him at once, the result would remain the same. Everything became clear. Behind the mask of a hero lurks on Jae-hyun, infamous as the hero killer. His comrades, seized with remorse, hastened to apologize for the trap into which they had led him. They confessed they did not anticipate the ambush, hoping for a safe route. But Jihyun only shook his head, refusing to accept the apology, for he saw no fault in it. He held out his hand to the leader, lifting him off the ground with a kind look full of confidence. The leader looked at him in surprise, amazed at his generosity. The people around him uttered Jihyun's name again, filled with gratitude, but he repeated, it wasn't their fault. However, the guy pointed out the real problem, the person who always sits in the back and lets everyone down. The hint was obvious. He glanced at Chai, smirking at her with a question full of mockery. Chai wasn't left out. She wryly parried, devaluing the friendship, calling it fake. She continued her taunting, claiming that even if the weaklings united, there would still be no use. Soon, her essence was revealed. Jae Sealhyun, a formidable member of the Thunder Hunters Guild, was standing in front of them. Jae-yun couldn't resist a barb, reminding her that she was always angry, rushing into battle blindly and failing miserably. A furious Chai hissed a threat, hinting that he'd better shut up before it got worse. But the guy only grinned, taking the strange object out of her hand and ironically repeating her own words. There was no fear of her in him, only cold calm and defiance. In the same second, his body erupted. He activated the first slot, changing beyond recognition. The battle suit shone on him, inspiring power and determination in his voice. Only the weak have regrets. Mad with rage, Chase shouted, calling him an arrogant bastard, and ordered her men to destroy him. But the boy stood calmly, as if the wind itself was on his side, confident that no one had the power to kill him. And suddenly the expression on his face changed. It was as if he was petrified of the sudden betrayal. Behind him were those he considered friends. They're the ones who stabbed you in the back. Alarms flashed on the screen. Health levels were dropping, movements were stilted. Shocked, almost speechless, Jihyun asked a question full of pain. Why had they done this? One of the former comrades lowered his eyes and muttered an apology. He had just been tricked. The leader explained they needed money and saw no other way out, asking them not to hold a grudge. The boy trembled with sadness and resentment, unable to believe what was happening. How could those he considered family do such a thing? And then Chai reappeared, laughing with sadistic pleasure, as if watching a tragicomedy. She wryly noted how naive this guy was, believing in feelings when money was all that mattered. As she came closer, she coldly said that she was about to get rid of him for good. The taunts continued. She vowed to kill him every time he entered the game without even giving him a chance. She recalled his words, that in life he was nothing, and only here was he significant. With a chuckle, she added, now he was back to being what he had always been, pathetic and forgotten. Consumed with anger, the guy lunged at her, barking at her to shut up. But it was useless. He was easily felled, and purple blood flooded the ground. Again the traitors swooped down and impaled him on all sides. When it was over, Chai thanked those who had helped get rid of him, savoring the victory. In the last moment, tortured by pain, Jihyun asked the question, how could they betray him despite everything? One of his former friends went berserk screaming, demanding that he die, because they were paid millions to do so. The world crumbled for him. It turned out all that pain and betrayal was just worth the money. He remembered their vows about family and bitterly whispered a rebuke for stabbing him in the back, for betraying him. The faces of the traitors were pale and fear was red on them, but there was nothing to be done. The ominous message flashed on the screen, dead, over and over like a sentence. The game announced he was dead and would not be able to return for 48 hours. The guy woke up in reality, devastated, as if something inside him had died forever. In that instant he broke down. Everything inside broke off, only emptiness remained. Soon the news broke about Warlord, the market leader game that brought in billions in profits. The camera showed an epic battle with a red dragon, to the enthusiastic cheers and donations of the crowd. The game existed only in virtual reality, which brought in an incredible amount of money. It was the one place where he had accomplished something, where he felt he was living. In life, he was a nobody, trash, a useless man on the side of the road. Once upon a time, early on, a player asked his level in admiration, surprised at his skill. Then he held out his hand, offering to join him, and Jaehyun felt he had found his place. Now, remembering that betrayal, he almost forgave them. But the rage boiled up again. The warrior gathered himself and ran outside. And he swore his revenge would be terrible. He dialed Dongsu's number, filled with determination despite the pain. I was walking down the street, tired and pensive, not noticing the traffic light change to red. When he realized it, it was too late. If he'd known how it would turn out, he wouldn't have let anyone near him. He darted to the side, but the truck was faster. The impact was terrible. Blood flooded the asphalt. Passers-by screamed in horror, shouting that the man had been hit by a car. Jae-yun lay there, barely breathing, hearing only the automatic answer of the phone, subscriber unavailable. The irony was creepy. He was hit by a garbage truck. With his last breath he whispered, to die now. He couldn't. Not yet. Pain hit his brain. He remembered the scream, the words about the millions, and the betrayal. He saw Che's face, the cold grin, her glee at the moment he fell. And in those seconds, the boy vowed revenge. No mercy. Lights flashed. A strange activation began. And the screen said it was checking the connection. A greeting followed. He was back in the game, under the name Hercom. He was now standing in training mode, where he was to survive against the monster that was the Minotaur. Jihyun stared into the void, not realizing what madness was going on. One newcomer shouted to him, demanding that he gather himself and help in the fight. Players realized, alone cannot defeat the monster, we need to unite. The guy was confused and remembered. This monster had been removed from the game 5 years ago for difficulty. Another player was surprised, because according to him, the game has only been around for 10 months. 10 months, repeated the boy, as if he had fallen into a dream. The players exchanged glances. Something about him was strange. One demanded that he not delay and be ready. But Jihyun just stepped aside, leaving the others confused. They cried out in horror, thinking he had finally lost his mind. The Minotaur lunged at him, with a snarl full of rage and a desire to kill. His comrades shouted that he was going to die, but the boy remained standing, not retreating a single step. He met the monster face to face, and took him down with one punch. The beast roared and then collapsed, struck in the heart. The other players froze, unable to believe what they were seeing. They stood in silence, stunned. One, delighted, stepped forward and offered to join the team. He held out his hand and motioned for them to join together, as if repeating the scene of betrayal. Jaehyun's face changed, his eyes dark. Coldly and confidently he said, "The decision has already been made." The players were confused, asking what he meant. There was no response, only a muffled thump, billowing with rage. Blood spurted, and there was a whisper in the silence. To believe again was to fall lower than a dog. On the screen, her Kong, the hero killer, has returned. Jaehyun woke up suddenly, as if he had surfaced from deep darkness in an unknown place, removing the VR helmet from his head. The boy looked around in bewilderment, trying to realize where he was and why everything around him seemed alien. His gaze caught on the display cases. He was in a game store, in the V-Gear department with virtual reality equipment. Memories began to slowly return, and the man remembered being poor and playing here 5 years ago without his own helmet. The young man frowned, pondering in earnest. What if he had actually returned to his past? The thought had lodged itself deep in his mind, and as soon as he allowed himself to believe it, a plan began to take shape on its own. Without wasting a second, he dashed forward, wading through the human stream, gripped by an urgent purpose. His train of thought quickened. Now he had the experience of 5 years under his belt. If he used the knowledge wisely, he could not only succeed, but also take revenge on those who betrayed him. He walked resolutely up to the store employee, handed her the card, and demanded the V-Gear kit in a confident voice. The girl was slightly confused, but nodded and assured me that she would place the order as soon as possible, although she looked tense. Anxiety and excitement swept over the man. He was already mentally drawing up a plan to rapidly pump up the character. But soon he heard the unpleasant news. There were not enough funds in his account for the purchase. The boy was shocked, not expecting such a humiliating turn. The blow to his pride was particularly painful. With a bitter chuckle, he remembered how pathetic his situation had been back then, in the past, where he didn't even have change in his pocket. He stood in the center of the store, angry at himself for forgetting. Back then, after all, he was only playing here because he couldn't buy his own device. The inner tension was growing, and the man asked himself an agonizing question: where to get money urgently, because there was no time at all. Suddenly, Che's familiar face flashed on the nearest screen, an element of the advertising campaign for a famous game. A question appeared on the screen: "What are you waiting for?" A defiant message, as if specifically addressed to him. Che's words were bold and tough. She argued that doubt was unacceptable, especially during battles. The man froze in front of the display, watching the Thunder Queen calling all to become true lords of war. He didn't move, standing in front of the huge screen of the Warlord game, gazing into the words of the call to action. Immersed in thought, the guy analyzed his situation and searched for a logical but daring next step. Che's face and her mocking gaze flashed before his inner gaze, as if he had become a nobody again. Clenching his fists, the man made a decision. He would not wait from now on, for the time of the week had passed. The sun was slowly slipping toward the horizon, and the scene changed. Now he found himself in his supposedly poor apartment. The virtual reality system was already in place, all ready for the new phase to begin. The technician reported his work completed and left, and the man only nodded briefly without saying a word. He held the card in his hand and pondered. The fastest way to get money now was to use it. The card advertised a quick loan, promising minimal terms and no red tape, almost a fairy tale. Recently, he sat in front of a serious man asking for 10 million won, and the man, to his surprise, immediately agreed. But suddenly the man stopped and added with an unkind smile, "But," and the atmosphere instantly thickened. With menacing abruptness, he plunged the knife into the map on the table, and it was clear how serious his innuendo was. He made it clear, if the money was not returned on time, the consequences would not just be severe, but unbearable. The boy gritted his teeth, not uttering a word, though everything inside him clenched with anxiety and fear. But despite all of this, he still took the card. Paying for revenge seemed more important to him than fear. The man began to put on the VR helmet, firmly reassuring himself. He's willing to sacrifice his soul for revenge. Images of the traitors flashed through my mind, and a thirst for retribution filled my chest with red-hot anger. He commanded the system to start the connection immediately, not wanting to wait a second. The system recognized him instantly, confirming his successful authorization into the game world. A world familiar to him opened up before him. He became Herkin again and received the solemn greeting of Warlord. He stood silently, waiting for that character to appear that was supposed to guide him, His memory was working at its limit. And then a girl with shining golden hair appeared. Her energy could be felt almost physically. She called herself Ariadne and announced that she had come to be a guide on this new journey. The man recognized her immediately. Ariadne held out her hand, explaining the basic principles of the game and offering to choose one of the starting classes. She pointed out 3 possible paths, the choice of which determined the further development of his avatar. The first was the warrior, a class designed for close combat, attacking and leading a frontal assault. The man reflected. With experience, it would be easy for him to evolve, but alone the path might prove too thorny. The next class was the cleric, a protector and healer who helps others, but this path he rejected immediately. He made it clear he had no intention of saving or protecting anyone. He had only one option left. Ariadne smiled slightly, wishing him luck in his upcoming challenge, activating the choice. Golden threads of magical energy flowed from her hands. The ritual of moving to the next stage had begun. A stream of magic enveloped him from all sides, and a shadow of surprise flashed across the boy's face, hidden beneath determination. A system message popped up in front of his eyes. He had selected a base class and would be moved to the appropriate tower. The boy found himself inside a mysterious tower, where he was greeted by an imperious voice filled with magical power. That voice belonged to Golko, the mentor leading those who chose the path of the mage. Golko asked what kind of magic the young mage wished to learn, and the man said without hesitation, "Dark." The mentor froze abruptly, shocked by the answer, as if such words had not been spoken within these walls for a long time. He interjected, perhaps mishearing. Maybe the guy meant to say earth magic? Age takes its toll, after all. But the man firmly reiterated that darkness was his choice, and left no room for doubt. Golko's face reflected worry. He warned that this path could destroy not only the body, but the soul as well. However, the man calmly replied, he understands everything and accepts the risk fully consciously. Mentor shuddered, seeing that determination, and suddenly transformed into a terrifying creature of shadows. He became a skeleton-like monster and said with a hoarse grin, "It's been a long time since anyone has gone this way." The creature warned that if the boy was really ready, he should put his hand on the book of skills. He added that this path was full of traps and dangers, and the choice should be made wisely. But Jae-yun didn't hesitate for a moment. He immediately placed his hand on the book, ignoring the warnings. With a broad, cheeky smile, he pronounced it hard to call him reckless. He chuckled rumblingly, amazed at his student's boldness and stubbornness. He's never seen anything like this before. The man remembered an old video from the past where a necromancer had single-handedly defeated an unimaginable boss. That scene was a revelation. He realized he needed that same power, by all means. The system reported he became a necromancer, gaining the title of necromancy novice and his first skill, skeleton shard. With a grin full of determination, he repeated the name, skeleton shard. He activated the skill. A glowing skeleton began to form in front of him from the streams of energy. The system explained the skeleton warrior would only fully revive after absorbing enough magical energy. Guy watched silently as his first creature was born out of light and darkness, making a silent vow to himself. The skeleton was fully formed. From this moment on, Jae-hyun became a true necromancer, just as he had dreamed. With a determined smile, the man pronounced that it was time to get pumped, and wondered where to look for the nearest dungeon. He turned around to assess his first summoned creature, and saw something utterly ridiculous. The skeleton was amused, having completely lost its empty head, already bouncing around on the ground like a pop gun. The man froze in confusion, not believing his eyes, so absurd did it seem. Without wasting another moment, the man stepped confidently into the glowing portal that had suddenly appeared before him. And in the next instant, he found himself in the beginner's dungeon, a place created for combat training for beginners. Puzzled by what had happened, Jae-hyun began to ponder the skeleton's strange behavior. His actions clearly lacked the automaticity to which he was accustomed, remembering the events of his past life. After opening the skill window, the guy decided to study the description of a skill called Skeleton Fragment. Running his eyes over the text, he came to the conclusion that the oddities were most likely caused by a low skill level. This conjecture instantly awakened his resolve. Delay is unacceptable. It is urgent to intensify. Absorbed in thought, the man suddenly caught a muffled roar that shook the dungeon like an alarm. The coal wolves entered the arena. Their timely appearance seemed to beg to become a testing ground. While these creatures were not particularly strong, their speed made them ideal targets for skeletal practice. Without a shadow of a doubt, the guy activated the skeleton fragment skill, directing the energy of the spell forward directly at the wolves. The magic swirled in the air in a swift whirlwind, preparing to materialize into the form of a combat servant. The skeleton materialized fully and stood in a fighting stance, showing readiness for the upcoming battle. Feeling his enemies approaching, he automatically adopted a fighting stance, as if he knew he would have to attack soon. The wolves slowly crept closer, cautious and tense, as if something was telling them of danger. With a smirk full of confidence, the man mentally ordered the skeleton to destroy the enemies without a trace. The skeleton snapped out of his seat, collapsing on his opponents with ruthless force, not showing an ounce of fear. To Jaehyun's surprise, the skeleton was doing much better than one would expect at such a low level. The young necromancer thought that if things continued at this pace, he could reach serious power quickly. But that elation was instantly replaced by shock as the skeleton's bones scattered across the arena in different directions. The guy froze in a daze, unable to realize how this could have happened right in front of his eyes. The skull fell to the ground with a thud, and there was an almost comically doomed expression on the bone face. Overwhelmed by the confusion, the man couldn't figure out what had gone wrong in the first place or how to fix it. Urgently opening the skill window, he tried to find the reason for such a ridiculous failure. Scrolling through the description further, Jaehyun suddenly realized he had simply forgotten to activate the battle mode. It turns out that the skill has a built-in artificial intelligence with 3 modes: defense, attack, and special. Running his hand over his face, the boy admitted with a heavy sigh that he had overlooked this important point. He decided to try the defense mode first, so as not to lose the minion for nothing and to evaluate the AI's performance. As soon as the mode was activated, fire erupted in the skeleton's eye sockets as if it was a manifestation of will. However, it soon became clear that things had gone very wrong. The wolves pounced on the skeleton and began to torment it. They were tearing his limbs apart like a rag doll, and he himself didn't even try to defend himself. It was a disaster. The man froze, unable to believe that such passivity was the defensive mode. Snapping out a desperate thought, he activated the third and final mode, hoping that one would prove to work. And at that moment, the skeleton began to, dancing. The absurdity of what was happening finally turned into a tragicomedy. His eyes filled with tears. Everything had gone downhill, and the man only blamed himself for every stupid choice. He collapsed to his knees, crushed by despair, and faintly whispered that he was slowly going mad. Trying to salvage the remnants of his dignity, the guy tried to delete this character through the menu. But a system message appeared. Deleting a character is not available until 3 months after creation. Sitting on the cold ground, the man bitterly realized that he couldn't even change classes no matter how hard he tried. He remembered the impending loan payments and grinned grimly, thinking, maybe under the car again? The boy was increasingly lost in thought, not understanding why fate was playing him so cruelly again and again. Looking at the useless skeleton that brought no use or hope, he felt everything boiling inside. With irritation, he began to berate the bone servant, accusing him of insanity and ordering him to stand still. And then his memory brought up an unexpected image, a necromancer from the past, a master to whom even the undead lords obeyed. The thought of how exactly he controlled such skeletons suddenly popped into his head like a clue. And then, like a flash, came an epiphany, an idea that could turn the whole course of events. Reopening the skill description window, the man noticed an item that he had foolishly missed earlier. Turns out the skeleton has a deep learning system and can improve itself during battles. Guy realized. All this time his acolyte had been watching the fight and copying the actions, albeit ineptly. Moving closer, the man firmly decided to utilize this feature to its fullest potential. With a slight chuckle, he turned to the skeleton, hoping to evoke at least a shadow of a meaningful response. The skeleton turned to him, with an expression of slight confusion in his empty eye sockets, as if he didn't know what was expected of him. With a certainty that left no doubt, Jaehyun remarked, this skeleton was incredibly lucky to have a master. He added that he himself was once hailed as a genius and his team was considered unrivaled. The guy then reminded of the most important rule of combat that everyone should learn first. Abruptly jumping forward, he struck the skeleton, demonstrating that rule. If you didn't dodge, you're dead. The skeleton collapsed to the ground before he could react, and looked almost offended by the surprise. Jae-yun immediately struck again, and the bony body collapsed again, unable to even raise its defenses. In a ruthless voice he ordered, "Get ready, otherwise you won't learn anything. There is simply no other way." He continued to strike, not allowing the skeleton even a second of respite. Each new blow knocked the skeleton to the ground, but the guy didn't stop, stealing his will through the pain. Then he began to explain, "You can't stand around and wait for a blow. You have to learn to dodge, to respond, to survive." He asked a direct question. Did the skeleton understand what was now required of him? The skeleton stood up and adopted a stance that smacked of determination and readiness for real combat. A little time passed, and the wolves reappeared in the hall, swiftly rushing in to attack. But now the skeleton began to apply the lessons learned, confidently dodging attacks and moving with precision. Catching the moment, he threw a powerful punch and knocked down one of the enemies, confirming the success of the training. The fight continued, and the skeleton's movements became more and more honed. And Jae-hyun watched in amazement. Suddenly he stopped and looked at his master with an expression of delight in his eye sockets. The man reprimanded him, reminding him that even in the moment of victory, one must not lose concentration. That said, he grinned and acknowledged the last attack had indeed succeeded. The skeleton fragment skill began to develop rapidly, responding to each workout with increased efficiency. When the level upgrade notification appeared, the guy felt genuine joy and a sense of fulfillment. After that, he headed to the newcomer village, Vigo's castle, where life was bustling and newcomers were gathering, going among the players. The guy reflected that the skeleton was far more useful than one might have thought, and after a couple days he would be able to handle the dungeon. But then he thought that this was just the beginning, and the real test would begin when he reached level 10. Suddenly there was a shout somewhere off to the side. A loud voice cut through the crowd. "Hey." Jae-hyun turned around and saw a large man with a group, clearly annoyed by their recent confrontation. The guy assessed their appearance and came to the conclusion, more like third-rate hooligans than real players. Frustrated at the waste of time, he wondered if he should deal with them right now without wasting a second. Just as one of the men swung to strike, another man, wearing strange clothes, appeared out of nowhere and stopped the enemy attack with remarkable ease, as if it were a child's prank. The stranger made it clear with a sneer that attacking people like this was pathetic and pure barbarism. The angry big man immediately demanded an explanation, wanting to know who this guy was and if he was involved with Jae-hyun. But the latter, with a lazy chuckle, replied that he was not quite related, leaving the meaning of his words vague. Jae-hyun recognized the man immediately. Before him stood Matador, the head, the illustrious hero from the past world. He immediately noticed the warrior's powerful musculature and his bold and distinctly recognizable fashion style. Jae-hyun remembered very well that Matador was a top-ranked fighter, one of the strongest players in history. And now he wondered in disbelief, why had such a powerful figure suddenly appeared in this place? Meanwhile, Matador, like an actor on stage, continued to wryly mock the rudeness of his attacker. The bandit tried to justify himself, saying that Jae-hyun had hit him first, and Matador shouldn't have interfered at all. But the mighty man calmly uttered the ancient proverb about retribution and an eye for an eye, as if recalling the law. And at that moment, his fighting spirit erupted like a flame, so frightening that the air trembled with power. The big, bulky man was numb with fear, unable to move. While Jae-hyun was watching, Matador, continuing his sarcastic tone, pointed out that it was the one now trembling that had struck first. With a frightening smile, the man added that the debt should be repaid, according to the rules of street justice. And then one of the accomplices screamed in panic, realizing who they were facing. Matador himself was in front of them. The boy explained in awe. He was the head of the Red Bulls, the top guild, a madman always raring to fight. He confirmed that this particular man bears the nickname Killer, and it is deadly dangerous to even joke with him. The thug turned pale, not understanding why such a dangerous figure had interfered in this petty proceeding in the first place. Matador stepped closer, slow and threatening, and coldly asked if he had anything to say now. The assailant froze like a statue. Fear gripped him, robbing him of even the ability to speak. At that instant, the entire gang tore away, shouting apologies loudly as if fleeing from the wrath of the heavens. Matador smiled slightly as he looked at them, as if satisfied that it was all over with words. The bandits, on the other hand, scattering in terror, hardly thought they were just words. He turned to Jae-hyun with a slight smile and asked if everything was okay, advising him not to worry. But Jae-hyun, remaining silent, took a step back, which genuinely surprised the matador. Turning around, the guy coldly said that he didn't need any help now, even from someone like this. And without explaining himself, he walked away, leaving the man behind him in slight bewilderment and a tinge of disappointment. Matador hummed quietly, grinning that Jae-hyun was far colder than he remembered. Meanwhile, Jae-hyun was walking away, seething with anger and feeling the humiliation clutching his chest. His palm trembled, whether from anger or the memory of the power he felt. He clenched his fists, promising himself that the next time he met Matador he would be a completely different person. There was a firm determination on his face, as if he were making a vow to himself without the right to retreat. The scene changed. It was now a training dungeon, with flames dancing across the walls. Jae-hyun sat alone, deep in thought about the difference between his power and that of the likes of Matador. He remembered not only him, but also another warrior, named Shiro, for both were almost equal. If he really wants revenge, he just has to become much stronger than he is now. Suddenly, a beast, a huge, tiger-like beast, leapt out of the shadows and charged with fury. The skeleton, his faithful companion, lunged at the monster, deftly using his new abilities. He fought fiercely, each blow was accurate and devastating, dealing tangible damage to the enemy. After a quick but fierce battle, a system message appeared in front of Jae-hyun. The skeleton had killed the tiger. His level had increased, but even this accomplishment did not bring a sense of satisfaction. It took 3 days before he reached level 10, and that seemed like an unacceptably slow pace. He cast a glance at the skeleton, who looked tired, shabby, but still a little amused. A congratulations came next, for reaching level 10 and completely clearing the dungeon of monsters. The rookie tag was removed from his profile, and the awards ceremony began. An artifact appeared on his wrist. Battle clock containing status, map, inventory, and more. The guy was happy to realize that after many years he could use the device again. He called up the characteristics window and a menu appeared in front of him with his name, Herkin, class, necromancer. The parameters of strength, stamina, intelligence, mana, and current level were also specified. The system suggested distributing the free characteristic points, and the guy thought for a moment. Since this was his first experience, he didn't want to make a mistake and waste points. A necromancer, logically, should have invested in intelligence or mana to boost magical abilities. But suddenly, a mysterious smile appeared on Jae-hyun's face, and he resolutely put everything into force. The message confirmed. Strength increased by 50 units, and he looked at his palm with confidence. The characterization window now showed 53 points of strength, and he was completely happy with the choice. The skeleton, noticing this, stared at his master with round eyes full of bewilderment and slight disappointment. The undead seemed to have decided that Jae-hyun had abandoned the path of a necromancer by pumping up his physical strength. The guy frowned and irritatedly asked what the skeleton was even thinking to himself, missing the point. He tapped his companion lightly on the skull, clarifying that he was not betraying the craft, but instead stepping forward. Jae-hyun explained, investing in mana right now wouldn't have the desired effect, but strength was an entirely different matter. With it, he will be able to pass on to his companion the combat techniques he has accumulated in his past life. He said this with complete seriousness, as if laying the groundwork for a future victory. Guy told the skeleton to focus on training, adding that he knew ways to make up for the loss. He then made his way to the local branch of the Adventurers Guild located inside Vigo Castle. Inside, there was an atmosphere of lively excitement as newcomers crowded around waiting for assignments. The room was buzzing with arguments over who would get the quest first, and which one would prove more profitable. Jae-hyun quickly realized that there was nothing worthwhile among the available tasks, but everyone was enthusiastic. He approached the guild officer and politely asked to see the task list. The one looked at him with surprise and said that only very difficult, near-death missions were left. Everyone else gave up on them. Too much risk, especially for newcomers. The staff member hesitantly asked if he was sure that was the kind of assignment he wanted. Jae-hyun thought for a moment. These quests really were terrible by all accounts. But then his face cleared up, and he mentally noted that he had finally found the right hidden mission. The choice fell on a quest called Beam Mountain Cave, promising more than just an experience. The essence of the quest was simple: destroy the weak monsters near the mountain and get 10 gold coins as a reward. The employee, noticing this, worriedly asked if he was really willing to do such unprofitable labor. Jae-hyun nodded confidently. He was absolutely sure of his decision. He mentally noted, if he completes this tedious task before reaching level 15, he'll get a title that will change everything: perspective, one of the rarest and most valuable. He remembered how much characterization boosts such titles, especially those with percentages. And perspective is exactly that. He's going to make him a real imbalanced character. With that thought, the guy moved on to the second phase of the plan, preparing the gear. Upon reaching Mount Beam, he was determined. But what he saw reflected the shock on his face. Turns out his equipment looked wild, brightly colored, ridiculous, totally unsuitable for a real battle. His insides clenched in shame. It was humiliating for a warrior to look like that. Mentally he yelled, gasping in annoyance. He couldn't imagine a worse outfit. He remembered that all the money had gone to the skeleton, and there simply wasn't enough for normal gear. The old armor had to be sold, even despite its modest qualities. Now he was determined to complete this quest, earn gold, and dress up properly. As he made his way through the forest, he made a mental promise. He would complete the mission at any cost, no matter what. Suddenly the frame changes to a simple meadow with bushes. And suddenly, out of the thicket showed a bloody hand, as if someone's last cry for help. A young man crawled out of the bushes, wounded, exhausted, and on the verge of consciousness. He tried to call for help, but his voice was weak and lost in the trees. The wounded man was crawling, leaving a trail of blood, and his face was disfigured with contorted pain. The silence of the forest was broken only by his convulsive breathing and his trembling hand reaching upward. A group of teenagers with grim smirks stood nearby, talking quietly, as if enjoying the suffering of their victim. In another corner of the forest, one young player, overwhelmed with joy, shouted, enthusiastically announcing that he had finally reached his goal that he had been striving for so long. A lad named Malty stood proudly in shining armor, like a hero from the tales, and proclaimed that his great adventure was beginning at the very foot of the majestic Mount Bima. The man proudly announced that he had already reached level 11 and might soon become one of the legendary players known to the entire neighborhood. However, his thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a loud cry for help somewhere nearby among the thickets. He immediately rushed to the sound and soon saw a man dragging his injured comrade while desperately begging for rescue. Claiming that they were attacked by a creature completely unlike any monster they had ever known, as if it were the spawn of another world. When Malty wanted to know the details, the strangers explained that they had escaped with difficulty and in their panic had forgotten all the healing potions that could have saved their lives. The stranger added that they had only survived by chance, but without the healing elixir, his friend would soon die. Malty didn't hesitate to promise to help them, assuring them that he had a couple potions, and began rummaging through his inventory, looking for them among the other items. The gray-haired man tearfully thanked him, vowing that one day he would repay his generosity with kindness. But just as the boy turned away to get the potion, two men suddenly straddled him from behind, traitorously attacking him with cruel smirks on their faces. Blood spattered brightly and profusely, drenching the grass around him, and the entire fight was over in one lightning-fast and merciless instant. Malty collapsed to the ground, gasping and bleeding, while the two traitors mockingly laughed at his trust and naivete, stating that it was his kindness that made him an easy target and the perfect victim for their kind. One of his attackers grinned, noting that he would gladly take all of his belongings for himself, ignoring the weak and hoarse resistance. Malty, whispering with his last strength, tried to object that he had been tricked, but all he heard in reply was ridicule and accusations of his own stupidity. The gang leader chuckled loudly, mockingly saying that only the last fool would believe such a cheap act. A system message appeared on the screen. Player Malty was dead, his aura completely gone from the world. Another notification appeared next, stating that his watch had fallen as a trophy for those who had betrayed him. The gang gathered around the fallen clock, laughing merrily, and one of them remarked with a satisfied grin that bullying the newcomers was a truly entertaining pastime. Their leader grinned sinisterly and offered to go in search of the next victim, proudly displaying the guild emblem called Ralph's. In another corner of the forest, Jaehyun's skeleton stood at full alert, carefully watching the two massive tree monsters lurking in the shadows. Wooden wolves with eyes full of rage rushed forward, their fangs glistening like white-hot pieces of metal. Without losing his cool, Jaehyun raised his finger and activated the attack mode, causing blue cold flames to erupt in the skeleton's eye sockets. The skeleton rushed forward, its sword shining like frozen glass, slicing through the air with inhuman precision. With one sharp blow, he slashed one of the wolves while the claws of the other one crashed helplessly against his blade. Many notifications immediately flashed on the screen, confirming that the skeleton had destroyed enemies and earned hundreds of experience points. Jaehyun noted with a slight half-smile that his decision to reinforce the servant first was wise and very timely. He glimpsed a glimpse of his strange clothing, mentally chuckling at how little it meant compared to his real power. Meanwhile, the skeleton stood in a comical pose, as if ashamed of something, covering his head with his hands in front of his master. Jaehyun calmly told him to stop this farce and pack up, for they had a tough ride ahead of them for the sake of successfully completing the task. The servant clutched his weapon and adopted a steady fighting stance, fully focused on the journey ahead. But suddenly the air was cut through by the whistle of an arrow, and with terrifying speed it slammed into the skeleton's skull, causing it to freeze for a moment. Stunned by what had happened, Jaehyun began to look around warily, trying to determine the source of the unexpected attack. Two men approached him, and one of them hurriedly uttered an apology, claiming that he had fired by mistake, mistaking them for monsters. As they got closer, they began to explain the situation, but the skeleton still remained wary, ready to engage at any moment. Jaehyun outwardly accepted their explanation, but inside, suspicion was already brewing because of the facial expressions that hid something sinister. He noticed that one had a player's watch on his wrist, and the other had a bloody knife glinting behind his back, warning signs. With doubt in his voice, the boy hummed, realizing that these two were clearly not to be trusted, for there was something obviously unkind in their actions. But, with a sudden smile, he offered that he could forgive them if he got at least one man a potion, a test of sorts. The men feigned embarrassment and said as if they had nothing at all, but offered to help pump instead. Jaehyun asked if they were sure they wanted to help, and they quickly confirmed as if it was a mere formality to them. At that moment, a roar shook the forest, as if nature itself had risen, warning of an impending storm. One of the men grinned, commenting that now was as good a time as any to train and fight. They laid out their plan to Jaehyun, to weaken the monsters so he could strike one last blow and take all the bounty. The boy agreed, continuing to watch their actions closely as they whispered, making evil plans behind his back. The large warrior took a step forward and provoked the timber wolves, provoking their fury as planned beforehand. The mage meanwhile cast a spell, strengthening the monsters, after which their bodies began to glow with an ominous purple glow. Then it was as if he had accidentally pushed one wolf right at Jaehyun, setting up a sneaky ambush. The boy was surprised at this maneuver, but quickly raised his hands, preparing to face the attacking beast. From afar, the entire group was watching from afar, hoping that Jaehyun wouldn't stand up to the onslaught of the surprise attack. But their faces quickly lost their mask of joy. They looked like they've been farted in the nose. Instead of death, the guy defeated the wolf lightning fast with a skeleton and expressed his displeasure at its slow reaction time. With a chuckle, the guy showed a thumb and offered to continue the experiment, which shocked the group. The two men looked at each other fearfully, not expecting such a turn, and began to formulate a new plan of attack. They decided to unleash a wave of monsters on him, hoping to overwhelm him in numbers and defeat him by force. During the attack, while Jaehyun was fighting, the warrior picked up the moment and launched a sly strike from behind, hoping to catch him off guard. He raised the heavy hammer and shouted that he would hit the target accurately this time, putting all his strength into the blow. But to his horror, Jaehyun easily dodged. And the warrior screamed with rage, realizing that things had not gone according to plan. The guy slid to the side with incredible speed and swept his sword under his opponent's arm, and cut into his chest, causing him to recoil and scarlet blood to gush out, while the others only watched in horror until one of them screamed in panic, unable to believe his own eyes. Jaehyun gave the command to attack, and fire flashed in the skeleton's eye sockets, heralding the imminent end. They rushed forward, covering the distance in seconds as if merging with the shadow itself. One of the enemies, trembling, began to beg to be spared, saying that everything could still be negotiated, but was ignored. In a steamy strike, the boy and the skeleton knocked their opponents to the ground, the latter screaming in pain and flying away. Their bodies collapsed to the side, and Jaehyun and the skeleton were left standing in the epicenter of the pulsing blue flash. Jaehyun turned away, throwing a cold phrase into the void about knowing full well what type of person he was dealing with. He added that such personalities always betray those who trust them and rob the victims till the last drop. Slowly approaching one of the enemies, he remarked with an icy calmness that he might have believed before, but not now. The wounded man begged for mercy, offering everything he had left to save his life. But Jaehyun calmly said that he was no longer able to trust anyone. Without further ado, he struck the final blow, ending him mercilessly. A message flashed on the screen. Player Ralph had fallen, and 8 trophy watches were left without an owner. Jaehyun hummed, deciding that under such circumstances, the wisest thing to do was to use what he found, starting with his clothes. The skeleton was kicking the defeated enemy with fury, as if taking out all the accumulated rage. Despite the blood covering his bones, there was excitement in his gaze, and he cast an expressive glance at his master, making Jaehyun wonder with a slight smile if the loyal servant wanted something for himself. Jaehyun stepped closer and held out his hand, filling the skeleton with a soft blue light. That he started to close the wounds and holes in his skull. As if gaining new strength, the skeleton proudly swung his sword above his head, showing everyone his new combat pants. The man chuckled quietly as he watched the gone ally pose, clearly enjoying his updated image. Calmly, almost indifferently, the boy added that in these worlds, looks meant little, more important was fortitude and skill. Nevertheless, he couldn't help himself and with a limp gait began to demonstrate elements of his new equipment. Leaning slightly towards the skeleton, the man whispered that their watch was something rare and truly valuable in this world. He explained that when these watches are sold, one item from the owner's inventory drops out as a prize of sorts. Artifacts could often be found among the fallout, be it black goblin pants or a tree-filled sword. Sometimes there were even cursed books, and considerable sums, which caused the guy to laugh ravenously and have a gambling gleam in his eyes. He admitted that it was through these chance finds that he was able to create something important and unusual. Raising his hand, the man displayed a golden mask with fanciful ornamentation. The work was completed ahead of schedule. Now he had decided. It was time to record each adventure, creating an image that would be not just a strength, but a legend. The guy is determined that unique style will be his calling card in the next stage of his journey. Suddenly his expression changed, as if a long-forgotten conversation about something important had resurfaced in his mind. He was sitting in front of a guild member at the time, inspired by an idea, masks that united all members into one. His plan was to have everyone wear a haha mask so their guild name would flash all over the server. The man thought for a bit and agreed, and the guy with a bright smile suggested a name, haha mask. Peering at the mask in the palm of his hand, he remembered that he had wanted to create a completely different personality, but things had gone differently. Raising the mask to the sky, the man filled it with a glow of blue magic, and vowed to never let his victories be stolen again. A shadow of anger flashed in his gaze, and he whispered that with this mask he would prove his strength and right to respect. As soon as his face was hidden behind the mask, his expression turned cold and his body was filled with tense energy. The scenery changed. Before them lay a mountainous, cracked terrain, mottled with ruins and ancient gates. The boy and the skeleton stepped into the portal. At the same instant confirmation came. The entrance to Mount Beam's dungeon was open. Inside the gloomy tunnel, the man moved along the walls, pondering that this was where the blue werewolves resided. He understood. This dungeon was not for the weak, but now, with the new equipment, it could be passed even in 10 minutes. The boy shouted with delight as he ran down the narrow corridors, the skeleton striding after him, clutching his weapon tightly. But hours passed, and now the man lay on his back, looking tiredly at the ceiling, not understanding where were the enemies. He stood up abruptly, crying out words of confusion. Why was the dungeon empty, and what was even going on here? The guy started muttering that if someone went through the dungeon, there should have been a notification system. He suspected more and more that there had been a glitch, and at that moment his gaze stopped on the strange wall. As the man stepped closer, he touched the swirling blob of violet energy, and amazement flashed through him. The energy swirled harder, as if the portal was sucking in air, opening a path to another, uncharted dimension. The system confirmed. The instant dungeon theater had been found and suggested going inside immediately. The guy knew that such dungeons appeared randomly and could interrupt the main plot, freezing progress. He also realized the challenge would be many times more difficult, but the reward for taking the risk was either all or nothing. The man thought it might be wise to back off, because death would mean a 2-day lockdown. But in the next second, a new expression appeared on his face, and he took a step toward the portal. A simple thought resounded in his head. The only goal was to pass this place. He didn't need anything else right now. As soon as the boy stepped over the edge of the portal, a blinding light fell upon him, forcing him to cover his eyes with his hand. When his vision returned, he found himself in a giant arena, as if right in the center of the ancient Roman Colosseum. Looking around, the man thought that perhaps this place was meant for duels, and excitement swept over him. The ground shook beneath his feet, the rumbling increased, and the guy started looking around, trying to figure out the source of the noise. A beast burst out of the shadows, huge, ferocious, wolf-like, and its every step exuded hatred. The monster straightened up in front of the man, growling in a way that made the air shake, and a name popped up over his head: Warped Werewolf. The boy stepped back, not believing his eyes, and barely audibly repeated the name, realizing the power before him. With a wild roar, the monster rushed forward, and the first blow caused an explosive wave throughout the arena. The boy didn't have time to dodge. He was thrown away, and his body crashed to the ground with a thud, painful impact. Dust swirled around the arena. The skeleton froze, unable to believe what had just happened to his comrade. With his feet steady, he raised his sword, emitting a muffled guttural sound, vowing to protect the man until his last breath. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Ji-hyun stood up, grinning sarcastically as if he couldn't believe what was happening. He even laughed as if the morning had just begun, noting that such monsters were often associated with quests. The man ordered the skeleton to prepare for battle and added with a chuckle, "If they lose, there will be no dinner." With a wide grin, he rushed forward as if his body was the embodiment of anger and the desire to win. The skeleton followed him, and the two of them, without collusion, moved toward the enemy in a coordinated and swift movement, using the skeleton's sword as a springboard. The guy soared into the air, deftly taking off like a circus acrobat. The beast looked up, noticing the flying man, and hunger flashed in its eyes as if it had seen dinner. In flight, Ji-hyun began to form a skill, compressing the energy shrouded in purple darkness within him. This power fused with his weapon, and he activated a skill, naming it Devil's Curse. As soon as it took effect, darkness enveloped the werewolf, and a grimace of pain appeared on the beast's muzzle. The blow was accurate. The monster howled, recoiled, and his arm flew off to the side, severed in one motion. A notification appears: Devil's Curse has been activated, and the enemy stats have been reduced by 10%. The guy noted with satisfaction that even for a first use, this skill had performed quite well. But the beast didn't give up. With a roar, it attacked again, and a mighty fist strike rained down on Ji-hyun. A new message popped up on the screen. The werewolf had gone into berserk mode, and all effects had been removed. Ironically, the man thought, he shouldn't have hoped for an easy walk in the instant dungeon. The second he realized it was time to use the skill he had saved for an emergency. Raising his hand, he activated the device on his wrist, speaking a command and triggering a hidden ability. A wave of blue energy erupted from his body and swirled around to encompass everything around him. This energy rose higher and higher, spiraling as the ground beneath his feet began to tremble. A flash of light illuminated the arena, and a radiance like the midday sun illuminated the battlefield. When the glow disappeared, Jaehyun appeared in a new armor shrouded in obscurantist energy and said with confidence that the fight was just beginning. This was the work of his special skill, Slot On, a unique ability in the Warlord game that temporarily enhanced the player by absorbing the energy of the game's world. The essence of the ability was that it activated an enhanced form that granted the user supernatural powers for a limited period of time. Each player looked different in this transformation. The individual appearances and unique enhancements gave it a completely different look. It is because of this uniqueness that players came up with a single name for the transformation: Final Mode. Jaehyun stood in his new form, surrounded by a bright blue light, raising his hand with confidence, ready for the next phase of the battle. Meanwhile, at the other end of the field, the distorted werewolf let out a terrifying roar, showing sharp fangs, radiating wild fury. The beast darted toward him with unseen speed, and Jaehyun met his attacking motion, surrounded by a dark blue energy that only grew stronger the closer the enemy got. The werewolf suddenly rolled sideways, raising its claws to deliver a deadly blow. He unleashed a flurry of attacks on the man, but Jae-hyun, as if knowing his enemy's every move, dodged. The one blow came very close. Taking advantage of the moment, the boy bounced back sharply, dodging another fierce blow, which, when it hit the ground, left a deep crater. Jae-hyun realized that the monster in front of him wasn't just a monster. His speed and brute strength made him a truly dangerous foe. Missed just a few punches and the fight could have ended in favor of this savage beast. As the werewolf prepared to attack again, the man chuckled quietly, deciding it was time for a change of strategy. He unleashed a sharp blue charge from his sword, aiming it towards the monster, aiming to interrupt the attack and knock the enemy back. The monster howled in pain as a wave of force hit it, throwing it backwards. And Jae-hyun remained standing, ready to continue the battle. He smiled, realizing that it was challenges like this that made the game truly fun. But then his face changed. He looked up in surprise. The monster rose into the air and came crashing down with a rumble, forcing Jae-hyun to swiftly retreat from the point of impact. As he maneuvered, he remembered, the beast was now in a berserk state, when its strength increases manifold. Turning around, he found the werewolf right behind him, its eyes blazing with a blood-red light. Falling on the wolf, Jae-hyun noticed with a chuckle that he had obviously forgotten something. And then, the skeleton suddenly appeared between him and the monster, resolutely raising his sword. The skeleton delivered a powerful and accurate blow, severing the werewolf's arm, opening up a chance for Jae-hyun to get back into the fight. The boy shouted to the skeleton that now it was his turn to use the technique they had practiced together. The werewolf was stunned to see the two rushing towards him with unimaginable speed, giving no chance for a response. Jae-hyun and the skeleton attacked in sync, delivering a precise and devastating blow. The beast's body began to tear under the power of the dual attack. It fell apart without offering the slightest resistance. A message appeared on the screen. The distorted werewolf had been defeated, and immediately afterward came a notification that Slot-on had been deactivated. After the battle was over, Jae-hyun admitted with a slight smile that the result was pretty good. Soon a quest card appeared, confirming the completion of the quest, clearing the cave of Mount Beam from monsters, with a reward of 10 top-level gold coins. Additional notifications followed. The skeleton had defeated a powerful monster. Its skill had received rank E. They also received 20,000 G, a skull, and a werewolf skin as trophies. Jae-hyun was pleased to note that the loot was quite valuable. After the battle, a system message popped up on the screen. He had obtained a rare tainted Pathfinder necklace. This necklace belonged to a unique class of chronicle items and increased all stats by 18 points. The guy was shocked by the item's high characteristics. It was non-transferable, but it far surpassed ordinary unique artifacts, which spoke of its rarity. He noticed the name, Tainted Pathfinder, on the necklace, and it made him wonder if it was related to his speculation about the main quest. Then 3 glowing windows appeared in front of him, informing him that 3 new titles had been registered on the account. The first was the title of Promising Rookie, which gave plus 3% to intelligence and magic, something he was aiming for. Second was the title Heroic Contender, which increases stamina by 3 points. It was well-deserved, as he went through the instant dungeon alone. But what struck him the most was the third title, Tainted Pathfinder. He hadn't expected that. He confirmed to himself that was the title of the first chapter of the main story quest, Confronting Spoils, which added immense value to everything he had just received. This basic plot formed the backbone of the Warlord world, connecting key characters and powerful bosses. It was for its rewards that this quest attracted all players, as it was the most coveted content of the game. Jae-hyun remembered his past life. Back then, he had barely reached the 4th chapter of this storyline. Now he had discovered its beginnings much earlier, and so he realized it couldn't have been just luck. Smiling, he exclaimed that he had found a real treasure, and then activated the logout, still in mild shock at his achievement. In the next moment, he was back in the real world. Breaking news was being broadcast on the screen. The Hydra Guild had officially entered the neutral generator dungeon, planning to complete it in 3 months. Jae-hyun sat silently in front of the screen, holding the cup in his hand, thinking intently. Then sarcastically commented on his good fortune. A real treasure? Oh, for crying out loud, it's not funny. He banged his forehead on the table, complaining that someone had already reached the final quest, and if he went in there now, it would already be over. He wondered aloud if he should hang back and prepare for the next chapter later. But after a moment, his face lit up with inspiration, and he exclaimed, "Wait, maybe this is my chance." He realized the whole world was now focused on confronting Spoil, because this is the first major quest nearing completion. And it hit him. If he released a video about the quest now, it would definitely blow up the internet. The perfect opportunity for a viral video. In his imagination, he was already sitting on his throne, surrounded by wealth and success, enjoying a gaggle of laughter. He was glad that he had recorded every second of the gameplay, and now he was going to edit everything immediately and post it on YouTube. Jihyun added that editing is an art and should only be trusted to professionals. He decided to turn to the one who had been called the god of montage in the past, confident that this was the right person. The scene changed. A girl with pink hair and glasses was eating noodles while looking at her phone. Her name was Ramani, the editor. She received a notification of a request to edit a dungeon sweep video from a user named Herkin, level 15. That surprised her. She grinned and muttered, mauling, "What kind of newbie could put out something worthwhile after a sweep? Most likely a rich nub." But suddenly her expression changed dramatically. She jumped up from her seat and screamed as if she had seen something unimaginable. She leaned toward the screen, her gaze becoming sharp, and she said quietly, "I found it." Ramani, a freelancer known as the Hellmouth, held up her phone and screamed with delight after discovering something truly inspiring. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the woman stood in her luxurious apartment overlooking the city, holding a clipboard and staring quietly into the distance. A coworker ran into the room, calling her director, and asked if she had called him. She reported that a new video related to the quest confronting Spoil has just been uploaded. She explained that the video was particularly interesting because it showed a level 15 player single-handedly defeating a warped werewolf. No one had ever done that before. The coworker was shocked. He later confirmed their team also watched the video, and yes, the player's level is really low, so it doesn't need attention. He personally liked the video, though. The woman smiled and said confidently that she wanted this player. And then she added, "I want him at once." She ordered me to find him and bring him right away. Her identity was soon revealed. It was Chai, the queen of the finance world and the heiress of the giant Thunder Group Corporation. And in the warlord world, she was known as Sari, the Thunder Queen. Jae-yun came out of the VR and looked at the statistics in surprise. The video uploaded yesterday had already gained thousands of views, something he hadn't expected even in his previous life. The video, A Perfect Victory Over Werewolf Trader, has garnered 6,000 views. Commenters marveled at the skill, with the guy comparing the result to months of effort earlier. Jae-hyun noticed a new change. Romaine's name now stood out in the contact list. Romani himself wrote to him, breaking the usual secrecy. The man wondered why the mysterious character was suddenly active. Jae-hyun irritatedly wanted to block him, but he was interrupted by a question about the date of the next video. He tapped his fingers nervously on the table, not knowing the answer. The man pondered the content. It was impossible to repeat the success of Werewolf, and there were no new ideas. He remembered the advice to start filming only after level 50. Jihyun pondered the action, stepping into the game. The man decided to act immediately to make the most of the chance. He smiled and shrieked. The connection was successful. Jihyun's name flashed on the screen, combined with Haho's mask. The character became an object of discussion, attracting attention with his unusual accomplishments. The audience noted the skill of the guy's movements. Even after many repetitions, his fighting style caused admiration and a slight sense of déjà vu. The dialogue was interrupted by a question about a familiar face. Suddenly, a woman entered. The interlocutor hesitantly pronounced Ella's name. Yell, a member of the Red Bulls Guild, mentioned the guy's growing popularity. Jae-hyun wearing a Haho mask became the main topic of discussion among players. The uniqueness of the control was discussed, with Jihyun's movements lacking the stiffness of a novice, and his summoned ally surpassing his counterparts in skill level. The man suggested a duel with Jihyun, but the idea was cut short by Yell. Reminded to prioritize, meaningless conversations interfered with preparation for important assignments. She announced the imminent broadcast. The guy, hearing about the broadcast starting in 5 minutes, hurried to check the details. The organizers reminded about 200,000 viewers who bought tickets. The guy appeared on the air, causing a strong reaction from the audience. Each of them met with the leader of the Red Bulls Guild. The man listened attentively, preparing himself for the upcoming dialogue about strategy or alliances. Matador Chev, a rank 9 player and warlord, was discussing the imminent arrival of the Dungeon Gate. The guy noted the importance of the event for the guild. He saw the portal and activated his final form. The countdown was coming to an end, and the guy approached the portal. The leader turned to all the guild members. The order came to prepare for battle. The man checked his equipment, realizing that the success of the operation depended on his actions. The name of the Raiders Association branch in Figus Castle popped up on the screen. The boy studied the information, planning his next steps. Jihyun found that there were no quests available in this area. The man sighed disappointedly and hit the table. Among the tasks are only wolf hunt and the search for a lost dog. The guy decided to stop filming temporarily until he finds worthy content. The stranger recognized Jae-hyun as the hero who had cleared the cave of Mount Bima. The man was wary, assessing the possible consequences of this encounter. He doubted if he'd ever seen the boy before. Jae-hyun remained calm, avoiding direct answers to hints about the past. Hotan introduced himself and asked about the encounter with the mutant in the cave. The man became wary when he heard the exact details of his feat. Jae-hyun denied knowing the guest, but he remembered the werewolf with the unusual look. Jae-hyun tried to hide his nervousness, avoiding unnecessary details. Hotan assumed the monster's connection to the corrupted's power. The man nodded, realizing the gravity of the situation and its implications. The interlocutor explained, an unknown force was causing the monsters to go mad. Jae-hyun thought about the magnitude of the threat to be eliminated. The Raiders Association has announced a reward for catching the source of corruption. Suddenly, the guy grabbed the man's arm. Jihyun volunteered to help, calling the target a sinister type. The guy didn't hide his excitement after receiving a hidden quest with high potential. Hotan doubted the boy's willingness, but he insisted. The man agreed to give it a chance, with the condition that he prove his skill. Jihyun was advised to find a Himbri at Bangsu Castle. The guy got a letter of recommendation that opened up access to training. A task has appeared. Deliver a letter to a Himbri. The reward is a skill book, valuable for progress. The guy came out and started shouting happily. He had managed to take such a cool assignment. Jae-hyun froze in amazement as he read the quest message. The man couldn't believe his eyes. He had the chance to become an apprentice to a Himbri, one of the 7 followers of the great Mage Boken. A Himbri turned out to be a key NPC handing out rare skill books. The guy realized that this encounter was a rare stroke of luck that could change his game progress dramatically. The opportunity arose due to the coincidence of the title, Rising Star, with the Trader Count's quest. Jae-hyun was glad that now he wouldn't have to search for video material on the man suddenly remembered an urgent matter. He postponed the quest, realizing that he needed to complete his previous obligations first. The case shifts to the woods. The guy grinned and threw the skull, in order to activate his signature technique. Finally, the skeleton appeared and stood before the boy. Jihyun decided to check the rewards after the battle. The man used the werewolf skull to enhance the warrior skeleton. The skull added werewolf traits to the skeleton, increasing its stamina. The boy approved of the change, despite the slight disadvantage in strength. Jihyun equipped the trader's Pathfinder necklace. All of his characteristics increased by 18 points, which greatly enhanced his potential. The class parameters improved, completing the training. The man noticed the skeleton fragment in his inventory, but put off examining it. He showed 2 more small shards in his hands and threw them on the ground near another skeleton. They formed 2 energy spheres. Finally, near one servant skeleton, 2 more of the same appeared. He was just shocked at this turn of events. Jae-chin got an assignment for a group of 3. The guy started planning interactions with his new allies. Jihyun was reminded of the need to work as a team. The man nodded, realizing that success depended on teamwork. The guy studied the map, noting the monsters in the region. But there was still a shocked skeleton nearby. A huge level 25 bear appeared on the screen. Jae-chin looked at his attempts to attack him with the trees, but sharply evaded them. But it wasn't that simple. The bear was preparing to strike him with his paw, which took the kid by surprise. But now he began to command, "Take the bear." And now the skeletons with swords were already flying at the animal. It's not exactly a success. The bear pushed the skeleton away from him with ease. The guy slapped himself on the forehead and said we should use unconventional attacks, get off the ground, and ordered the next skeleton to attack. The one jumped in front of the bear's eyes again and intended to strike. But again he was defeated. Jae-yun watched in rage as the skeletons ignored his commands. The man shouted, demanding to come in from the dead zone, but the ghosts persistently attacked head-on. The boy didn't understand the reason for repeating the mistakes of previous attempts. His irritation grew with each failure, and his mana was wasted. Ji-hyun clutched his head, realizing the futility of the effort and comparing the skeletons to deaf soldiers incapable of learning. But then came the first one, a skeleton brother in pants. Handsome and fashionable, ready to kill. He looked at him, hopefully the coolest skeleton ever. Jae-yun froze when he saw the result, and his face contorted in speculation as to whether they were even trainable. The skeleton flew up to face the bear again. The guy exhaled sharply, realizing a systemic error. The conscripts had acted stupidly and recklessly. The man rubbed his temples, trying to take away his headache as the chaos on the battlefield contradicted all his expectations of necromancy. Ji-hyun decided to check the skill settings, speculating that the problem might be the limitations of the necklace or the skeleton level, and screamed loudly about how they were just idiots. The three skeletons held their heads and listened to the master. Ji-hyun sarcastically wondered if they even had brains. The skeletons attacked silently, confirming his worst fears. He explained the theory of blind spots, but the monsters still turned to attack. The guy cursed, comparing them to bricks. Ji-hyun sank to the ground tiredly, muttering that training them was like teaching rocks to dance. Jae-yun repeated the command in desperation. The skeletons attacked frontally again, ignoring all instructions, and he wondered why they were so stupid. He realized that one skeleton's knowledge was not passed on to others, and everyone acted in isolation, as if in a vacuum. The boy glanced at the mana scale, and the triple expenditure of resources made him question the advisability of conscription. Ji-hyun firmly decided that it would only be training until Banksa Castle, and the videos will wait until the skeletons are a team. He realized with chagrin that he could not escape the battle by replacing himself with skeletons. Ji-hyun entered the association's branch, ignoring the curious stares. Here he was looking for clues to the quest. Finally, some guy came out of the point where they hand out assignments. He was immediately jumped on by the rest of the men. They tore his clothes and asked, "What was the quest? What's the point of the quest? How much money? Give it to me." Ji-hyun caustically commented on the guildmates as predators waiting for someone else's prey. He avoided contact so as not to reveal the plans. The man watched the players lazily hanging around the quest board, whose dependence on other people's accomplishments made him despise them. The boy hid a smile as he walked past, considering his quest with a himbre too valuable to share with the hyenas. Ji-hyun quickened his step, realizing that every minute in the guild increases the risk of his mission being leaked. Ji-hyun handed Hotan's letter to the clerk, who dryly confirmed and pointed to the second floor without even looking. A crowd had already gathered behind him, trying to pass as easily as he did. The boy climbed the stairs, pondering the reward and hoping for something unique in the hidden quest. The man stopped at a himbre's door, feeling a strange excitement mixed with anticipation, and his hand trembled. Ji-hyun took a deep breath and whispered the start of a new phase before entering. What he saw shocked him. Jae-yun looked around the cluttered room and thought of a pigsty, but kept his face. Someone gave a voice from under a pile of books. A himbre, not looking away from the scrolls, mumbled, asking who he was. And Ji-hyun introduced himself, handing over the recommendation. The man barely held back a grimace when he heard he looked like an apprentice, expecting more respect for the test he had passed. A himbre was already conjuring up a reward for the kid. After receiving the skill books, Ji-hyun gave a fake smile and muttered his thanks, already planning a quick exit. Ji-hyun looked at the two books, Bone Armor and Helmet of Madness, surprised that he had given both away. The man frowned upon hearing that their case was complete, expecting a chain of quests, not a one-off. Jae-yun turned sharply toward the exit, whispering that this wasn't the end, determined to get through to the master. He jumped forward and started begging him. He'd do anything. His hands grabbed. A himbre maniacally asked him, would really do anything? He started thanking the young guy with a crazed look. He gave him the task of fetching an egg from the nest. There would be no reward. The guy wondered in shock how this cunning craftsman had managed to fool him. The scene switched to a man in armor walking down the street among the people. The crowd was discussing the fact that his armor was most likely worth a lot of money indeed. The knight approached the Dania in which our protagonist is located. The green-eyed guy confirmed, "This is the place. A hiding place for the person he's looking for."